It all began on a cold, fog-choked night when a group of us decided to test the local legend of Blackwood Forest. The stories were the kind you'd laugh off over a drink, tales of eerie screeches in the night and people vanishing without a trace. Still, there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right as we gathered at the forest's edge. Our breath misted in the frigid air, and the towering trees loomed ominously in the distance, their branches clawing at the darkening sky. I glanced at my friends, 6 of us in total. There was Jake, our leader, always the first to jump into danger with a cocky grin. Sam, the joker, already cracking jokes about the forest's infamous screams. Sarah and Lily, who seemed more nervous than they let on. And finally, Tim and me. Tim was my best friend, the one I trusted most. But even he seemed uneasy as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, plunging us into the murky gloom of twilight. The dare was simple: find the source of the screeching. According to the legend, if you ventured far enough into Blackwood Forest on an autumn night, you would hear a sound that wasn't quite human, but wasn't quite animal either. The locals called it the screech. But it was more than just a noise. It was said to drive people mad, to lure them deeper into the woods where they were never seen again. It sounded ridiculous, but that's what made it so thrilling. As we stepped into the forest, the dense fog seemed to swallow us whole. The trees were impossibly tall, their gnarled trunks twisting into grotesque shapes. The air was damp and cold, and the silence that enveloped us was unnerving. No wind, no rustling leaves, just the muffled crunch of our footsteps. My heart pounded in my chest as we ventured further into the gloom, and I began to regret our decision. Jake was the first to laugh, breaking the oppressive silence. "So, where's the screech?" he called out, his voice echoing through the trees. We all chuckled, but it was a nervous kind of laughter. There was a tension in the air that none of us could shake. I could feel it in my gut. The forest didn't want us there. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, but the deeper we went, the more it felt like we were being watched. Suddenly, a sound pierced the silence, a long, drawn-out screech that sent chills down my spine. It wasn't loud, more like a distant wail carried on the wind, but it was enough to stop us dead in our tracks. We exchanged uneasy glances, the bravado fading from our faces. "What the hell was that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. No one had an answer. "Probably just some animal," Jake said, trying to sound confident, but his voice wavered. "Let's keep moving." He led the way, pushing further into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches like skeletal hands reaching for us. Every step felt heavier, the air thicker with each passing minute. And then we heard it again, louder this time, closer. The screech echoed through the trees, bouncing off the trunks in a disorienting way. It was sharp, almost like a human scream, but twisted, unnatural. My skin prickled with fear. Sam tried to make a joke, but his voice faltered. No one laughed. We were all too on edge, our eyes darting around, searching for the source of the sound. But there was nothing, just darkness and the oppressive weight of the forest. As we continued walking, something caught my eye carvings on one of the tree trunks. Strange symbols, jagged and crude, etched deep into the bark. I pointed it out to the group, and we all gathered around. "What do you think they mean?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. None of us had a clue, but they filled me with an unsettling sense of dread, like they were some kind of warning. The screech came again, this time from directly ahead of us. It was impossibly loud, rattling through my skull and leaving a ringing in my ears. "That's not an animal," Tim muttered, his eyes wide with fear. For the first time, I saw Jake hesitate. "Maybe we should turn back," he suggested. But it was too late. We were deep in Blackwood Forest now, and the way back was swallowed by darkness. We pressed on, though every instinct in my body screamed for me to turn around. The screech echoed through the trees, relentless now, like it was following us. And with each passing minute, the forest grew more and more alien. The trees seemed to twist into grotesque shapes, their bark dark and slick as though drenched in something foul. The fog thickened, making it harder to see. The world around us felt wrong. Suddenly, Sam stopped dead in his tracks. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. We all went still, straining our ears. There was a faint rustling in the distance, just beyond the trees. But it wasn't just rustling. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving towards us. "We're not alone," Sarah muttered, her face pale with fear. Jake tried to take control again. "It's probably just some animal, like a deer or something," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Let's keep going. We'll be fine." But I could see it in his eyes. He was scared. We all were. There was something out there, something that wasn't an animal, and it was getting closer. We picked up the pace, walking faster, but the footsteps seemed to follow. No matter how quickly we moved, they stayed with us, always just on the edge of hearing. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The screeching had stopped, but the silence that followed was even worse. It was thick, oppressive, like the forest was holding its breath. Then, out of nowhere, the screech returned, louder and more feral than before. It was right behind us. We all froze, fear gripping us like a vice. I turned, expecting to see something, anything, but there was only darkness. "Run!" Jake shouted, and we took off, sprinting blindly through the fog. Branches whipped at my face, and my lungs burned, but I didn't dare stop. The screeching followed us, growing louder and more twisted. I lost track of time as we ran. It felt like hours, but it could have been minutes. All I knew was the primal fear that drove me forward, the need to escape. But no matter how fast we ran, the screeching stayed with us, a constant, maddening presence. My legs ached, and my lungs felt like they were going to explode, but I couldn't stop. None of us could. Finally, we stumbled into a small clearing. I doubled over, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The screeching had stopped, but the silence was almost worse. It was as if the forest itself was watching us, waiting. I looked around at my friends, their faces pale and drenched in sweat. We were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't normal. "What the hell is going on?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. No one had an answer. We were in too deep now, lost in the forest, with something stalking us. Jake paced the clearing, his hands running through his hair. "We need to keep moving. We can't stay here," he said, his voice shaking with fear. But none of us wanted to leave the relative safety of the clearing. Before we could make a decision, the footsteps returned, slow, deliberate, getting closer with each second. We all turned toward the sound, our eyes wide with fear. But there was nothing, just the fog and the trees. And then the screeching came again, louder than ever, So loud it felt like my skull was going to split open. It was right on top of us.
Go!
Jake screamed and we bolted again, running blindly into the forest. I could hear the others behind me, their footsteps pounding the earth. But the screeching was louder. It was chasing us, closing in. I didn't know how much longer I could keep running, but stopping wasn't an option. The forest seemed to twist and shift around us, disorienting, like it was alive and trying to trap us. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they were going to give out. But I kept going. The screeching was deafening now, a twisted symphony of terror. I could hear my friends screaming, but I couldn't stop to help them. I couldn't stop for anything. All I could do was run and hope that somehow we'd make it out alive. Suddenly, I tripped, my foot catching on a root, and I went down hard. Pain shot through my ankle, but I forced myself to get up, my entire body trembling with fear. I looked around, but the fog was so thick I couldn't see the others. I was alone, with only the screeching for company. It was closer now, so close, I could feel it vibrating through my bones. I stumbled forward, every step agony, but I couldn't stop. The screeching was relentless, pressing in on me from all sides. I felt like I was losing my mind, the sound consuming me, driving me to the brink of madness. I didn't know how much longer I could take it. The forest seemed to close in around me, suffocating, as if it was trying to swallow me whole. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, I saw a faint light ahead. It was small, barely visible through the fog, but it was enough to give me hope. I stumbled toward it, my heart pounding with desperation. The screeching seemed to fade, replaced by a heavy silence that was almost worse. I didn't know what the light was, but I didn't care. All I knew was that I had to reach it. As I drew closer, I realized the light was coming from a small cabin nestled between the trees. It looked abandoned, the windows shattered, and the door hanging off its hinges. But it was a shelter, a place to hide. I forced myself to move faster, ignoring the pain in my ankle, and staggered into the cabin. The door slammed shut behind me, and for the first time, I felt a small flicker of hope. I leaned against a wall, gasping for breath, and looked around. The cabin was empty, filled with dust and cobwebs, but it was quiet. The screeching was gone, replaced by an oppressive silence. I didn't know how long I had before it found me again, but I needed a moment to catch my breath, to gather my thoughts. I was alone, but I was alive, for now. I glanced around the cabin, searching for anything I could use as a weapon, but there was nothing, just broken furniture and rotting wood. I felt a surge of panic, the fear gnawing at me. I didn't know what was out there, but I knew it wasn't done with me. I could feel its presence, lurking just beyond the walls, waiting for me to let my guard down. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a loud bang. The door rattled, as if something was trying to break in. I backed away, my heart racing, and grabbed a piece of wood, holding it in front of me like a weapon. The door creaked, splintering under the force of whatever was outside. I could hear the screeching again, faint, but growing louder. It was coming for me. I braced myself ready to fight, but the door never opened. Instead, the screeching faded, replaced by a strange, eerie silence. I held my breath, waiting, but there was nothing. Just the silence and the darkness pressing in around me. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to keep moving, had to find a way out of the forest. I took a deep breath and forced myself to leave the cabin, stepping back into the fog. The forest was silent now, the screeching gone, but I knew it was still out there, waiting for me. I stumbled forward, my body aching, my mind numb with fear. I didn't know if I'd make it out, but I had to try. I had to keep moving, one step at a time, through the endless fog and darkness. As I walked, I heard faint whispers, like voices carried on the wind. They were soft, almost comforting, but they filled me with a deep sense of dread. I couldn't make out the words, but they seemed to be calling to me, luring me deeper into the forest. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind, but the whispers grew louder, filling my ears, drowning out my thoughts. I stumbled forward, my vision blurry, the world around me twisting and shifting. The trees seemed to close in, their branches reaching for me, their bark slick with something dark and foul. I could feel my sanity slipping away, the forest consuming me, its twisted presence wrapping around me like a shroud. I knew I was lost, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. Suddenly, I saw a faint light ahead, flickering through the trees. It was small, barely visible, but it gave me a glimmer of hope. I forced myself to move toward it, each step a struggle, my body heavy with exhaustion. The light grew brighter, and I realized it was coming from a clearing up ahead. I stumbled into it, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. The clearing was empty, just a patch of bare earth surrounded by towering trees. But in the center stood a stone altar, ancient and worn, covered in strange symbols. I approached it, my heart racing, and reached out to touch the cold stone. As soon as my fingers brushed the surface, a wave of darkness washed over me, and I felt myself slipping away, the forest claiming me as its own. I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up in the middle of the forest, alone, with no memory of how I got there. The fog had lifted, and the sun was rising, casting a pale light through the trees. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, my mind a haze of fear and confusion. I didn't know where I was, but I knew I had to get out of the forest. I stumbled through the trees, my body numb, my mind racing. The forest seemed different now, quieter, almost peaceful. But I knew better. I could feel it watching me, its presence lingering in the shadows, waiting for me to let my guard down. I kept moving, my heart pounding, my breath ragged, until I finally saw the edge of the forest up ahead. I burst out of the trees, gasping for breath, and collapsed on the ground. I was out, but the forest's presence still lingered, its twisted echoes haunting me. I looked back, half expecting to see something watching me from the shadows, but there was nothing, just the silent, empty trees. I knew I'd escaped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left a part of myself behind. I stumbled back to town, my mind reeling, my body trembling. I tried to tell people what had happened, but no one believed me. They said I'd been gone for days, but I had no memory of it. And when I asked about my friends, no one seemed to remember them. It was as if they'd never existed, as if the forest had erased them from reality. I spent days searching for answers, trying to understand what had happened, but the memories slipped through my fingers like smoke. All I had were fragments, echoes of terror that haunted me, lingering in the corners of my mind. The forest had taken something from me, something I'd never get back. And every night, I could still hear the faint sound of the screeching, calling me back. Now I live with the knowledge that Blackwood Forest holds a darkness beyond comprehension. I'm the only one who remembers, the only one who hears the echoes of terror that linger in the night. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see the twisted trees, feel the cold fog on my skin, and hear the haunting screech that will follow me to the grave.